What's up, good people? Welcome back to another episode of Undrafted Views. We're here. We talk sports from the sidelines, and today we're going to talk about the Miami Heat and share with you some of our observations about their season so far. Let's get into it.
The Miami Heat are currently number 3 in the Eastern Conference with a record of 29-17, having won 6 of their last 10 games. I feel like the Miami Heat are closing in on the top seed in the Eastern Conference. What has been one of your takeaways so far?
I think the Heat roster construction is actually pretty good. And hear me out. When you have Jimmy and Bam out and the team can still maintain a top 6 seed in the Eastern Conference, that's a pretty good roster. And the depth of the roster is also something that I think other teams should be concerned about. So for me, they have a pretty good roster construction, and and teams should be concerned about their depth.
Okay, I actually credit Eric Spoelstra just for keeping guys locked in with Jimmy out, Bam out, Tyler's out now, Kyle Lowry's out now. I credit them, the coaching staff, for getting the Heat ready to battle adversity on a nightly basis. You don't know who's going to be available, and it really shows us that Heat culture, oh, that is a real thing down in South Beach.
You know what? I appreciate the Heat organization for considering everybody's role on their roster, right? So we know that let's just face it, Bam and Jimmy will help the Heat go far. I get it. In the deep in the playoffs. So without them on the court, although the Heat was 10-4 with both Jimmy and Bam not being in the lineup, when we're talking about going deep, though, you're going to need Jimmy and Bam on the court. So I'm not saying that they're not needed. I'm saying that they are critical to the success of the Heat long term, especially in the postseason. But it is great to know when you're looking at the Heat roster that there are so many other variables, so many other players on their roster that can hold their own, that can be interchangeable when necessary to still have the Heat be so successful and beat teams that they need to beat. So I do like that. Another observation that I have is that the Heat has pretty good 3-point shooters. Now they got some snipers. I mean, come on, we already know 6 man of the year potential. Tyler Hero is going to be there, right? But then you cannot get mad at Caleb Martin. You can't get mad at Gabe Vincent. You got Max Strus. There are so many other players that can hit it from the 3-point line that really helps shape and give more points because Bam and Jimmy, they're not going. Their expertise is not on the perimeter. It just isn't, right? And if Bam and Jimmy are their core players and they don't do the 3 ball, at least you have at least 4. And if you want to add, if Kyle Lowry is feeling good, you got at least 5 players that can really, and don't forget about Duncan Robinson, maybe 6 that can really hit it from the perimeter and really help save the team when it comes to points as they're, playing these teams. So I think that that's something else that other teams need to kind of be prepared for when they're playing the Heat, especially in the postseason. I know the Heat is going to go to the postseason where their position right now, number 3, is a great spot. I hope they don't slide down, but knowing that when we get to the postseason, I can see them utilizing different matchups. You'll have your core 4 on the court, but then there will be other players that they'll be able to interject in their roster and during their games that's going to disrupt the scheme that other teams may have on them. So yeah, their 3-point shooters are pretty good on their roster. So yeah.
Now, although I believe the Miami Heat have really good perimeter shooters, I think in the last couple of games, they've been struggling as a team overall. If you take a look at the game against the Toronto Raptors, Miami Heat won that game. However, they shot 9 for 24 from the 3-point line. Against Portland, again, another victory, 12 of 35 from the 3-point line. Then against the Atlanta Hawks, 15 of 40. Those percentages are not going to cut it in the postseason. I still feel like Duncan Robinson's in a shooting slump.
Oh, I agree with that. Yes. But the potential for me, right? So although those numbers, as you mentioned, yes, the most recent games they played may not be as good. But if you look at the individual stats, and if those individual people and their stats show up as we continue on in the season and in the postseason, then that 3-point shooting will really help the Heat overall get over, on those teams that they're going to be playing against, especially when you look at the matchups in the East. That's all I'm saying. So individually, their 3-point shooting is decent. I'm not mad at that, but they have so many other people that if one person is not on, there's a potential that somebody else can be. And that's what I'm saying. If you look at a team like the Bulls,
Mhm.
Pickens is slim. Pickens is
Yeah.
slim when we're talking about who can be their sniper at any given time. I do believe that although we may see a shooting slump from Duncan Robinson, I don't think the Heat is not concerned about it, and I'm not
No.
concerned about it because there's other players. You still have Tyler Hero, and if Tyler Hero for some reason cannot be, he has been, thank God, consistently. But if for one game he's unable to, you never know what Gabe Vincent may do. You never know what Max Strauss is going to do. What I'm saying is that there is a potential of other players on the roster that can show up. It is that. It is that teams need to fear. I don't know, right? You can look at the other rosters. Once you scout the other rosters, you can always know that these other players ain't going to be able to do it. But these players on the Heat, because of Heat culture and the way Eric Spoelstra coaches, it's possible that they can show up. And that's what I'm talking about. It's the possibility for me. And I
Yeah.
think that makes them a threat in the East as we get into the postseason.
Mhm. One of the threats I think the Miami Heat have kind of up their sleeve whenever they need it. Now, obviously, like we said earlier, Tyler and Kyle Lowry are out right now, but they now have Bam and Jimmy back.
Mhm.
But Caleb Martin,
Oh my
remember
God.
when he was with the Charlotte Hornets? I don't think he was being utilized properly. Caleb Martin has found a home here with the Miami Heat culture, and it's like a perfect marriage. He's a great player for them. In the month of January, he's averaging 13 points, 5 rebounds, shooting 55% from the field, had a career high with 26 points. Caleb Martin has been a great piece for the Miami Heat.
A great piece, and I concur with that. Not only that, he is really a good defender. And he's been able to, I think, while Jimmy Butler has been able to absorb some of the defense that Jimmy
Mhm.
provides to the Heat culture or to the Heat roster, he's been able to kind of absorb some of that while Jimmy was not playing. He's really good off the ball, so I think that's really another additional feature that benefits the Heat roster. I just think he's really great. And you know what? He's only on a two-way contract. I
Mm.
really hope they sign him, and I think they have until like March 25th to sign him because if they don't sign him to another full-term contract, he's not going to be playing in the postseason. And I'm sorry, they need him in the postseason.
Oh, absolutely.
They need him in the postseason. So yeah, Caleb Martin has been a great addition to the Heat roster. I have to totally agree with that. Yes.
Yep. So let's get into the Miami Heat's next 5 games. They have the New York Knicks, the LA Clippers, and the Toronto Raptors at home. And then they go on the road for the Boston Celtics and the Toronto Raptors again. How do you think they'll fare up against these next 5 teams?
I have them going 4-1. I think they will lose one of the matchups to the Raptors during this stretch. Other than that, that's it. I think they can beat these other teams. I mean, the Knicks,
Yeah.
moment of silence. It's just over for them. And the Clippers had a surprising win against the Sixers recently. What is a 1 point dip? They won them, beat them with 1 point. I was really
Mhm.
surprised about that one, but I still think that he can overcome this Clippers roster for sure. A moment of silence for the Clippers roster season as well.
Yeah.
The Raptors, pretty good. I think the Heat will lose one of their two matchups during this stretch, and the Celtics, moment of silence. I
Yes.
can't with these teams. Yeah, so no, 4-1 for sure.
Yeah, I think the Heat have a pretty easy matchup against all of these teams. And ditto, I have them losing one of the matchups against the Toronto Raptors. I think they'll lose the one in Scotiabank just because, home court advantage. Raptors will probably play a little bit better. But yeah, I see the Heat going 4-1 on this stretch.
Another interesting thing I saw is that the Heat has the third easiest schedule for the remaining of the season,
Mm,
which is really in their favor. If, even with the people being out and, recovering from some minor injuries and things, it's going to really be great for them to be able to hold their spot, at least the top 1 to 3 seed in the East.
I wouldn't be surprised if they crept up to number one because they are right there. I think maybe half a game, maybe one game behind the top seed in the East. So pretty interesting what's going to take place over the next several weeks in the NBA season.
Can we just go ahead and say that we're on the Eastern Conference top 3 seed watch? No, for real,
Mhm.
because at any point, Nets, Bulls, and the Heat can change any given game. The whole standing can change. Unlike the Western Conference, the number one spot with the Phoenix Suns is pretty much solidified. I mean, if you look at the
Yeah.
game differential between the number one spot and number 2 and 3 spot, it's pretty, maybe 3 games, something like that.
Mhm.
But with the East, any given game, we'll be watching how the top 3 positionings will change. And so, yeah, Eastern Conference top 3 seed watch.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. All right, you guys, we're gonna wrap up this episode on the Miami Heat. Make sure you drop down in the comments and let us know what are some of your observations from the Miami Heat so far. We will see you guys on the next one. But until then,
Peace.
peace out.